Yep, that's me. You're probably wondering how I ended up in this situation.
What's up everyone, David here. Got a new video for y'all today, but before we get into it, if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to the channel, hit the bell notification so you don't miss out on any new videos. Remember, new videos every week. So for today, we're gonna be going over everyone's favorite lift. What is the #1 exercise we all do on International Chest Day? We do bench press. And before you even start thinking about repping out 2 plates, you gotta make sure the form is right. I don't wanna be seeing you all with fucked up form and a messed up setup. No, we gotta make sure everything's intact leading up to whatever that top set is. And it all starts with the setup. If you're gonna be using a regular bench press in the gym, and what I mean by that is the actual bench that's meant for bench press, then you don't have to worry too much about this. But if you're gonna be using a power rack where you have to slide the bench into it, then listen closely. This should be common sense, and I'm actually more disappointed in myself that I feel the need to say this, but make sure the bench is in the fucking middle of the rack. I've seen too many people slide a bench inside the rack, and it's way obvious that it's too much to one side and not in the middle. I mean, come on, it's common sense. If you're gonna be sliding a bench in the rack, make sure it's in the middle of everything, not off to one side, not off to the other, not diagonal, perfectly straight, aligned in the middle. After that, since you are gonna be using a power rack, you have to adjust the J cups either up and down depending on your arm length. Now, how high or how low do you go? That's a really good question. I'm glad I asked. You want to use your forearm and your wrist as a reference for this. Pay attention to where the halfway point is of your forearm. For me, it's right here, right around right here, and my wrist is right here. This little space right there, you want to put the bar, or specifically the J cups, to that level, because that's where the bar wants to be resting at that height before you unrack it. So if I'm right here, this is what it looks like. I have my arms up, and where's the bar specifically? Right here. Halfway through where my forearm, the halfway of where my forearm is, and my wrist. You see, it's right in between that region. Now, what is the reason for why we want it like this? Well, there's 2. One, you don't want to set it so damn low, like let's just say right here, to the point where you have to pretty much do a full-on rep just to get the bar out and then start doing your actual reps. And second off, you don't want to have it so high to the point where after you unrack it, you're struggling to get over the J cup. And then if for whatever reason you're struggling on that last rep, you can't get it all the way up. And finally, when you rack it, you miss one J cup because it's too high and you couldn't reach. So you want to set it right there, right in between. Once you get your setup situated, then you can start positioning yourself, get ready for your set. Now, anytime you're getting ready, there's 5 points of contact you need to keep in mind. That's gonna be both of your feet, that's 2, your hips, that's 3, shoulders / upper back, however you want to put it, that's 4, and your head, that's number 5. Those 5 points of contact should remain points of contact. Here's what I mean. Feet planted on the ground. Now, whether you want to have your foot flat on the ground or have your toe only and your heel up in the air, like some powerlifters do, that's fine, it doesn't matter. Just keep your feet on the ground. Your hips, keep them on the bench at all times. Shoulders, keep them on the bench at all times. Head, keep it on there. When you grab the bar, start positioning yourself ready to go. And when I say you need that point of contact, here's what I mean. How many times have you ever seen people, they start repping it out, but then as they start fatiguing, they start doing this. Their hips come off the ground. You don't want that. Keep your hips and your lower back on the bench. If you just start raising them up, then at that point, it just turns into a decline bench. And realistically, the reason why you're doing that is because you're compensating for the fact that you're not strong enough to get the weight up. Lower the weight, focus on practicing that form. If you're going to compete in powerlifting, then it's even more so important because you get docked for that. You get red lights if you keep your hips off the bench. Keep them on there the whole time. Again, 5 points of contact to prepare yourself to get ready for the bar. Left foot, right foot, hips, shoulders, head. Stay on the bench, except for the feet, those stay on the ground the whole time. All right, so we up close and personal now. Once you get your bench situated in terms of, proper bar height in the middle of the rack and all that, afterwards, once you get your 5 points of contact, then we start looking at the bar and we start focusing on the hand placement. Now, here's what we're gonna focus on specifically in terms of how far or how up you should be on the bench. You should be lying down, and when you're lying down, you should be able to see the bar directly over your eyes. If you're way too high up, then the bar is not over your eyes. You have to look a little bit more forward for that. If you're too low, you can't see the bar over your eye. You have to look up for that. So again, good way to measure it out is just line yourself up to the point where bar is at eye level. It's directly over you. Now, when it comes to your hand placement, that's going to vary from person to person depending on how comfortable you feel with your technique, your arm length, and everything. Me personally, I like to put my thumbs on the inner ring, and then from right there, expand my fingers out, and boom, wherever my pinky reaches out to, that's where I grip the bar. So it's just slightly before the next ring, and it's a little bit more past the halfway point between both rings. Now, if you're gonna be bench pressing, but putting a little bit more emphasis on triceps, then obviously your hand placement is gonna be a little bit wider. But you don't wanna go too wide. You also wanna keep in mind, when you're going down, you want your wrist to be stacked up over your elbow. If I unrack the bar and begin to do my set, as I'm coming down for one rep, look at where my wrist is in proportion to my elbow. My wrist is directly stacked over my elbow. That's what you want to aim for. Now, if you take too wide of a grip on the bar, what's going to happen? Let's just say instead of here, I'm out here. Unrack it, come down. What happens? My wrist is outside my elbow. So that's another thing to take into account. You don't want to go too close to the point where it's mainly emphasizing triceps, but you don't want to go too wide to the point where you're not stacking joints. Remember, you're always going to be at your strongest if you can stack joints over each other. So again, I put my thumbs on the wrist, on the rings, make sure I'm eye level under the bar. Wherever my pinkies line up, that's where I'm grabbing the bar. Get myself situated with those 5 points of contact. I make sure I emphasize my shoulder blades pinch back and I'm creating that arch, but although I'm creating that arch, my lower back is still on the bench. Last point in terms of setup before the bar actually starts moving up and down is whenever you unrack the bar, especially as the weights start getting heavier and heavier, you want to let it settle a bit. What do I mean by that? This bench actually has got a decent amount of cushion, but it's not hard. It actually, I could press my fingers into it. The cushion on the bench is only going to mold to the shape of your back, and it's only going to push down as much as you weigh. Once you add more weight on top of that when you unrack it, the cushion is gonna settle and compress a little bit more. So whenever you're benching heavy, after you unrack it, don't just jump straight into your rack. Make sure you unrack it, pull it out a little bit, give it 1 or 2 seconds just to let it settle, and then go for it. So in action, it'll look like this. You line yourself under the bar, find your hand placement, make sure your 5 points of contact are intact, shoulder blades pinch back, create that arch, and from right here, after I unrack it, I'm pulling it forward, and I'm gonna give it 1 or 2 seconds to let it settle, to let myself sink into the bench before I actually start moving it up and down. All that just to get the bar situated. Now we can actually talk about how to bench and how to move the bar up and down. Once you unrack it, here's where you want the bar to go down. You don't want to go just necessarily straight down. Why? It's because you don't know where the bar is gonna land. Some people, when they bench, the bar ends up so high up on their chest that mainly because their elbows flare too far out. For other people, when they bench, as the bar's coming down, it's practically over their stomach instead of over their sternum or over their chest. Where do you want to bench? You want to make sure the bar's coming down just right below your chest. A good way that one of my professors was explaining it to some of the other female students I had in a couple classes that I took in college was, she said, imagine where your bra strap is. That's the level of where you want the bar to be. She heard me over listening that. She's like, well, you don't have it. So just make sure right below the nipple line, right there. So pretty much you know where your chest kind of like is developed, that's where you want, where your chest kind of meets your abs, that visible line that shows you have muscle definition, that's where you want the bar to be. You don't want it too high up. Again, if it's too high up, your elbows are flaring too out. If it's too low, practically on your stomach, elbows are too tucked. You want to go nice in between, 45 degrees. Not too out, not too in between. Bar shouldn't be up here, bar shouldn't be down here. It should be right there, bra line. If you don't wear one, just right below the nipple line. Easy. Now that we went over all that, let's take it from the top. In terms of your setup, if you're going to be using a bench press, specifically a power rack, and you're just sliding a bench in between, make sure the bench is in between. Adjust the J cups halfway between the halfway point of your forearm and your wrist. This avoids you having to overextend to unrack it. This avoids you having to do a full-on rep when you have to unrack it. From right here, lie down. Make sure that you're not too high up on the bench. Make sure you're not too far low on the bench. You know you're doing it right is if you're looking straight up, the bar is directly over your eye level. From right here, your hand placement is gonna vary from person to person. You wanna make sure that you're not too far close if your goal is not to emphasize the triceps, and you don't wanna be too far out to the point where if you start benching, your wrist is outside of your elbow. You wanna go nice in between, and when you're going down, you should be able to have your wrist directly stacked over your elbow. Once you find that hand placement, now start emphasizing those 5 points of contact. Those 5 points being your right foot, your left foot, your hips, shoulders, make sure they're pinched back, and your head. Those should all be in contact with either the bench or the ground. From right here, create that arch. And make sure you keep the arch stable the whole time, and make sure you do not lift your hips off the bench even as you start getting tired. Once you unrack the bar, unrack, pull it out so it's over your sternum or over your chest. Give it 1 or 2 seconds to let it settle into the bench. Remember, the bench has a cushion. It's going to compress a little bit. Let it compress. From right here, start initiating the lift, going down and come up. Make sure that when you go down, you're not flaring your elbows out, and make sure that you're not keeping your elbows way too tucked in. You want to be in between, and then push it back up. Once you're done, make sure you do a full lockout first, and then bring it back into the bench. The last thing you want to do is start moving the bench or the bar back to the rack as you're coming up, because then you run into this problem where you hit a J cup. Instead, all the way up, then back onto the rack. There you have it, everyone. That's a step-by-step guide on how to bench press. Again, real popular exercise, but I see a lot of people fucking it up. It's one of the exercises where you can only muscle so much weight up. Eventually, if you want to get stronger, you can't just be relying on pure brute strength. You got to start relying on your technique, practicing it, make sure it's perfect. If you thought this video was helpful and you want to see more step-by-step explanations on different exercises, comment down below what's the next exercise you want me to guide you through. I'd be more than happy to make that video. And while you're at it, make sure you comment down below also any other video suggestions you'd like to see me in general, whether it be about mindset, motivation, fitness, diet, doesn't matter. I'll be more than happy to do so. Let's try to help each other out. Make sure you subscribe to not just my channel, but my girlfriend's channel, a couple channels. You don't miss out on any new videos. Remember, we got new videos across the board, across all 3 channels. And then for Instagram and TikTok, same thing. Make sure you follow me on my accounts, girlfriends, couples. I put all the links down in the description below. With that being said, I'll catch y'all next time.